Well, hello there and welcome to Travels with Geordie. If this is your first visit, my name is Peter Knowles and I live on this classic wooden motor cruiser here in Victoria, British Columbia, along with the loving memory of my pup Geordie, all the while fixing it up for some pretty ambitious cruising someday. If that's the sort of thing you might find interesting, please consider sticking around and subscribing. I'd love to have you. Well, how about this lovely weather? It's just perfect. Early February. Is it spring? No, not quite yet, but it won't be long now. Anyway, this week we're going to carry on with some 3D design. I'm really excited to show you what I've got planned for the dinette area and all the modular stuff that goes along with that. It's pretty cool. Anyway, I also want to take a moment to thank all my Patreons and other supporters. Without you folks, there's no way I could carry on doing this. Thank you all so very much. Let's get to it. Before we get started, I thought it might be worth doing a quick little FAQ, frequently asked questions, about last week's episode and the galley design. There were more than a few questions that pertain to the same thing, so I thought it might be worth just pointing them all out. By far, the most common question was, Peter, you can't be working at that sink so close to the stairs. And well, yes, perhaps it looks like it's close, but actually it's just barely offset. The edge of the sink overlaps the top tread of the top step by about ½ an inch. And I've actually mocked up this entire galley before. Some of you will remember. Do I have a clip of it somewhere? What do you think? Not so bad, eh? Well, as you can see, it's pretty much like camping in here, but I did get a temporary galley in with my new Force 10 stove, which I absolutely adore, a bar fridge, and a really great sink with strainer from IKEA. Love it. I gave that a lot of thought, being able to stand here and make sure that I could work at this sink without falling down the galley steps. And actually, I plant myself very comfortably and can use the sink, no trouble at all. Many people asked about the security of the Helm Chair. I love this chair. And yes, it would be true. By the time this is tall and way up here, if I get into some rolling seas, yes, it is not going to be entirely secure. Actually, it's pretty heavy and remarkably secure. I have taken the casters off of it and put some little fuzzies on the bottom so it can slide on the sole without causing any difficulty. I'll probably improve that even yet. But what will happen is, when this is extended, and I'll talk about that more in future, I'm going to have a bracket that comes out from underneath the deck here that can latch into the post that is holding it up, which will make it completely secure. The other advantage of that is it locates it exactly where it goes so that the back of the chair would just barely miss the back of the forward end of the galley and the edge of the deck here. So it's always locked in exactly the right place. Anyway, we'll have a whole episode on this chair sometime soon, I'm sure. Several people asked about where I'm going to put the beer fridge, one even suggesting that the entire forecastle could be a beer fridge. Well, you've seen the size of the fridge I have to work with. It may not be the only fridge on the boat. You're about to see that there's going to be some storage space available underneath the dinette benches, and they will be pull-out storage. Whether or not they're just dry storage or possibly another fridge isn't yet determined. Now, the real extra thing about that, it's been a long time plan of mine to actually put beer taps on the boat. Yes, kegged beer. I live in British Columbia, Canada, where most of the breweries, in fact just about all of them, will sell you beer in kegs. And I've always just liked the idea of having a beer tap and pulling my own pints of beer. Whether or not I actually do that is yet to be determined. It is not practical. There's quite a few other systems that go with it and that take up space, and they're complex and you have to clean them regularly. It would just be so cool, and in keeping with the whole pub theme. Yeah, I don't know yet. Probably, but not for sure. I don't know. A few people asked about weight distribution. I don't know if you can tell looking over my shoulders, but we're actually tipped to starboard right now, more than a little bit. So weight distribution is something that I do have to consider. Now, in the end, there's going to be an awful lot of storage under this dinette. There's going to be a fair amount of storage under the double bed, which is on the port side in the forecastle. And there is a ton of storage under my main bed in the aft cabin, which is also to port. So in many ways, this little galley and its tiny little piece of soapstone isn't much of a balance on the starboard side. Now, as I've already pointed out, I'm already tipped to starboard and the galley's not even here yet. Well, that's largely because the starboard fuel tank is 3/4 full and the port fuel tank is completely empty. So that brings another topic that I can deal with in terms of balancing. Most of the design I do will try to keep the boat relatively balanced, but I can always fine tune that with the full fuel tanks, unless of course I've got both completely full. But that's such a joyous event that I can live with a little tippage until I've consumed some of that fuel. Where is the water heater gonna go? Yes, this lovely contraption of a water heater and other heaters and stuff, which is what kept me very warm during the very, very cold spell. It's a bit redundant now because it's not cold anymore. Anyway, simple answer is it goes directly below where it is now. In fact, it goes right underneath this panel. There's a void there. The fuel tank comes right to here, and that void there was designed for the hot water heater, and servicing it is by simply lifting up the step assembly here, which just lifts straight out, and I'll be able to access it from the side because all the fittings on it are one end and they'll face towards that opening. Anyway, that's all pre-designed, ready to go. I just got to do it. And lastly, quite a few people asked about what software I use for the animations. Well, I use AutoCAD from Autodesk to model in other words, create the wireframe model, and then I use another product also from Autodesk called 3D Studio Max to do the rendering, which adds the materials, in other words the textures, the lighting, and all the motion, both the motion of the camera and the motion of the objects. Long history with both these products. Ironically, the only copies I still have are old copies, which I own and bought when I was making my living doing 3D, and there is no way I can possibly justify buying a newer version. Well, it's a subscription now, and it's very, very expensive. So some days I actually get quite discouraged about it. I mean, if you were a carpenter and couldn't afford a hammer in your later years, you'd feel pretty bad. When these software stopped working on my old Coho, when these softwares can no longer function, I will never again be able to use AutoCAD and 3D Studio Max, and that is actually quite disappointing for me. So in some ways, the work I'm doing this last couple of weeks has been quite pleasant. Well, yes, indeed. I am super excited about this week's episode and getting into the design for this area of the boat. I've been thinking about this design for years, hundreds of hours spent in it and many, many drawings. I'm going to show you some of that stuff in a bit. But trying to figure out how this would all work out, at least in a way that I'm satisfied by it, has been quite a puzzle, and I've enjoyed it. For those of you who've been watching along for a while, you'll remember that I actually built a mock-up proof of concept dinette here a couple of years ago, and it worked out really well. I learned a lot from that about how the different seating combinations would work, and I'll put a link down below to where you can see those episodes if you haven't seen them before. Anyway, I want to talk about some of the criteria, some of the wants and needs I have for it. This is the space. You can see that it's actually about 9 feet long. And if you remember from the previous episode, I showed that this space along here, this corridor between the two windows, I want to leave available for certain types of cruising. Because certainly if I'm having to do a portside dock or raft up with someone or pick up a mooring ball sometimes on that, it just depends. I want access to that window. In other words, I don't want it plugged up with furniture permanently like it is now. But when I'm, let's say, at the dock here where I am for months at a time, well, I might as well make use of that space. So I want the furniture to be more modular, sort of like this cheap garden furniture is kind of modular. Can't wait to be done with this, although it's treated me well. Anyway, and then when you think about seating space, a dinette, if you think about what a dinette is, you've sat at it in a restaurant or perhaps in an RV or a boat, and it's sort of upright seating with the table relatively close to you, and it's fine for eating. It's not so bad for doing certain kinds of work and things like that, but it's not actually a living room, is it? Well, I don't have another room to have a living room in, so I want to be able to, modify it in some ways or make it functional so that it can also sort of be a living room space. And well, right now this is sort of in living room mode. I've been eating on my lap for quite a while now. And then finally, it also has to be a sleeping area. MV Geordie has a double bed in the back, and it's going to have a double bed in the forecastle, but it really is worthwhile to make sure that I get some overflow sleeping here. So yes, it'll fold all up into a bed the way many dinettes do. Anyway, enough to say it's pretty complex, and I'm going to show you. First, let me give you a little bit of an idea of how the actual CAD process works on the computer.
So here we are in AutoCAD, which is where I actually create all the geometry. It's a very accurate modeler. I've been using it for years for architecture. Anyway, you can see I have, the most of the hull of MV Geordie done, but really the only detail is in the wheelhouse, which is what I've been doing the last little while. And you can see into all the various little objects. Now, you can't work on it with everything on at once. So what I can do is isolate out, in this case, let's just isolate out the components of the dinette. That makes it a little easier to see what's going on. And even in this sense, I separate the components out into various elements that align with the logic of how I'm going to control things, but also in the relationship to the material that's going to go onto it. Because of course, these are all mahogany, and the wood grain has to show in the correct alignment. I then moved the project over to 3D Studio Max, which is where all the animation is done, as well as the lighting and the materials. So here I am in the materials editor, and all on the left here, you can see the materials I'm going to use, including, well, mahogany, which is prevalent in here. I also use it for some of the sort of cheap materials. Like, for instance, I didn't model the entire cook stove. I just used a picture of it, as well as the background, which is really just a panorama from Desolation Sound, which I just attached to this large cylinder around the outside so we can see it outside the windows. Moving on to the animation, you can see as I scrub through the timeline, all the various objects that move, including the camera, move back and forth and flip and fold. If you look carefully, you can see that I basically just hide the objects that fly into view, either outside the boat to the side or up above the cabin top where you can't see them. Anyway, it's all just movie magic.
Okay then, so we've got the galley all looked after. Let's move on to the dinette.
I've been calling it a dinette, but really it's a modular seating system, and we'll begin with the first bench at the aft end. And well, you'll be able to see I'm seriously influenced by the arts and crafts style. It's basically a Morris chair style bench, and but modified and arranged in such a way that it's suitable for what I'm doing here. Now the matching bench, which is the same except movable, followed by some plinth blocks, because basically these benches are up a foot, so you need something to put your feet on, followed by a table. Now this looks like a basic dinette that we're all familiar with. However, it has some neat features. I said the second bench was movable. Well, yes, it can slide along the floor. Yes, it's pinned down in locations normally. So now it can face forward, or it can be moved forward right up to sort of like the same as a helm position, and with its own plinth blocks. You'll see in this case they're not actually on a fiddle or anything. I haven't quite done the engineering for that. This is a nice arrangement for when you're underway and a guest would like to sit in, well, a passenger seat, sort of equivalent to the passenger seat in a car, still leaving a dining area aft. And I really like the setup actually because you can also walk right into the window against the table and use it as a work surface up at counter height. And that's one of the things actually I really like about this whole modular system. Alternately, the aft area can be made a little more comfortable by sliding the plinths and the table forward and lowering them, dropping in a few more plinth planks, and this becomes more of a living room area. One of the things we can also do is reduce the table down to more of a coffee table size using the Parsons table slide under extra leaf, which it's a detail I really, really love. And here comes the sweet part. What I call recline mode, where I can actually adjust the height and the angle of both the base and the backrest. And it's actually done quite simply through a system that I developed in my mock-up a couple of years ago, and it's really just a set of steps that the various parts can sit on. Okay, let's move on to the next arrangement, which involves turning the forward bench back around and sliding it down into recline mode, as well as dropping in its own little plinth panels. This is essentially living room mode, and I just love it. Okay, moving on. Let's rearrange the table, rearrange the plinths, turn it sideways, raise it back up to table height, extend the leaf on the forward end, and raise the forward bench. This gives me kind of a hybrid setup where the forward bench is set up at dining height and the table is extended, where the aft bench is still in recline mode. And this is another way in my previous mock-up I used the setup a lot, and it's just fabulous. Raise the aft bench and extend the table leaf, and now we have upright dining for two, as well as the inward end of the benches don't have a table in front of them, so it's nice to be able to stretch out, play the guitar, etc. This is also really cool. Okay, hold on to your hats. I'll move the table so you can see what's going on here. Yes, a swing out additional bench seat comes out from under the deck, and put the table back out, further out, extend the leaves, and drop in a whole bunch of pillows, and we have surround dining. I might do it. I don't know. It looks great. Anyway, finally, as I mentioned, what we also need is a sleeping arrangement. So tables are turned sideways again, both benches slide out flat, and we make up the bed for overnight guests. Perfect.
Hello and welcome to the Travels with Geordie Beer of the Week, coming to you from my virtual wheelhouse. Anyway, let's get straight to the beer. This is Nectarous from Four Winds, which is local, and this is part of their Zephyrus series. We've had a few of these over the last little while, and I've had this before actually. It's quite tasty. Well, it's been another week of a lot of work to get all this done, but I'm really very, very, very pleased with it, and I hope you found it interesting. In fact, I think I'm probably going to carry on over the next couple of weeks and finish the rest of the interior of the boat, the aft cabin and the forecastle. Only because it's sort of good work to be doing now. I can't really afford to carry on with any carpentry just yet, but that'll change in the next little bit. And I've always wanted to have this model done. And if you can stand it at all, that's what we'll do for the next little bit.
Wait, what? You can see right through the beer. Cool. I need a better green screen. Fun.
And foamy, no doubt about it. All right, let's get right to last week's winner of a Travels with Geordie t-shirt is Nathan Woodford. Nathan, get a hold of me and we'll make sure you get your Travels with Geordie t-shirt. Yes, that is a bit foamy, but it's a lovely sour. I hadn't liked sours until recently, and they're really, really growing on me. Anyway, we're going to jump right into the word of the week with no new support, and that is going to be green. It just came to me. Green. All this green corduroy upholstery, and well, green screen. I think it's cool. I hope you do too. Cheers. See you next week. Green.